Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. Greetings, drowsy spirit. Tonight, I will tell you a story that will help you fall asleep soundly. Remember to subscribe for more bedtime stories and like the video before we start. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is in the comments section. I would also love to know what story you would want to hear next. I can still clearly recall the day I left my hometown of Missouri and packed everything I owned into the back of my old grey Honda. After months of sending out resumes, I recently graduated. I was able to secure my first actual work at a developing logistics company in Cleveland, Ohio. I had the impression that all of my hard work was finally paying off. It wasn't easy leaving home. My mother sobbed the night before I went, but my parents were proud. Just promise you'll call every Sunday, okay? She repeated. I said I would. I had no idea how important those remarks would become in the future. Rent in the city wasn't cheap, so it was nice that the company volunteered to help new hires move. They collaborated with a few residential buildings that housed staff members. I responded, sure, when HR asked if I would be willing to share a 2-bedroom apartment with another new hire. I reasoned that knowing someone experiencing the same situation would be pleasant. I met Connor Wells in this way. He was a tall, sandy-haired man from Oregon who usually wore pricey sneakers and exuded a certain phony assurance. When we initially met, and he appeared to be amiable enough during the onboarding week, he spoke extensively about how he had already come up with suggestions to improve department efficiency and how he had aced his college internships. He exuded the kind of buzzword enthusiasm that makes co-workers scoff, but makes managers adore you. I nevertheless made an effort to be impartial. I was simply excited to begin my new career. Our flat was in a brand new, quiet, and tidy building in the heart of the city. It had a large communal living space with the kitchen had the appearance of something from an IKEA catalogue. Connor's room was on the left, and mine was on the right. There was also a small balcony with a view of the parking lot. It was all okay for the first couple weeks. Despite our busy schedules, we spent the entire day together because we worked in the same department. At work, he was more of a talker who always offered to help out and tried to win over the boss. Although I was the type of person who liked to work quietly and completing tasks, I had a strange sensation about Connor for the first time because of anything minor. Maybe 3 weeks in, it was a Friday evening. He had asked me if I wanted to join some of my co-workers for drinks. I said that I needed to catch up on some things because I was too exhausted. You know, dude, he remarked with a slight chuckle. You can't get promoted sitting behind your laptop all night. He sounded condescending, as if he believed he was already superior to me, but I shrugged it off. I heard him arrive intoxicated at around 2 a.m. later that evening. He began talking loudly in the living room, dropping something, possibly a bottle. He mumbled something that made my stomach turn, just as I was ready to get up and order him to shut up. Guy believes he is superior to me. Loser. Wondering if I had heard correctly, I froze in bed. He might not have been speaking at all. I told myself about myself. I dismissed it. However, I began to notice little things over the course of the following several weeks. I would relocate my toothbrush a little bit from its usual location. Even though I had left my laptop charger charging overnight, there were occasions when it was unplugged in the morning. My sister handed me my favorite cup, which I later discovered broken in the sink. Dude, maybe you dropped it and forgot. Connor shrugged when I questioned him about it. I didn't want to start a conflict over something that might have been an accident, but that nonetheless annoyed me. Then I got up late, really late, one morning. My phone was entirely dead, and my alarm never went off. I was positive that I had plugged it in before going to bed. I have an obsession with that. However, the charger wire was partially detached from the wall. I arrived at work just in time, sweating and in a panic. Later that evening, I tried to appear informal when I told Connor about it. "Hey, I guess you forgot to unplug my phone last night." When I woke up, the charger was halfway out of the wall. He gave me this strange smile as he looked up from his cereal. "How could I possibly unplug your phone?" "Man, I have no idea. It might have been bumped or something." He gave another shrug. "It sounds like a problem with you. Next time, perhaps set two alarms." It annoyed me that he said it in such a pompous and contemptuous manner. I began to feel uncomfortable around him after that. The bathroom would be left on all night, or the thermostat would be set to freezing when I got home. I once noticed him in my room and I arrived home early. He leapt as if he had been caught in the act. I said, "Dude, what the hell are you doing in my room?" He gave a clumsy smile. "Oh, I was just checking if you borrowed my notebook. Chill out." He flashed me that smile once again, as if he liked to irritate me, even after I told him to leave my room. A few nights later, I noticed a dim light beneath my bedroom door as I woke up at around 3 in the morning. The wavering illumination from the TV in the living room. When I opened my door to get some water, I noticed Connor standing there, next to the kitchen counter. He wasn't observing television. He was motionless, simply standing there. He didn't move, even though his face was turned toward my door. Didn't flinch. He simply gazed for about 3 seconds before muttering, "I couldn't sleep. Don't panic." He then returned to his room. That night, I didn't get much sleep. He pretended to be completely normal the following day at work, joking with colleagues about how he worked late on a client report. I began to question whether I was going crazy. Perhaps my paranoia stemmed from the stress of moving for work. Then, however, something occurred that eliminated all uncertainty. I woke up one Thursday morning to find all of my work files strewn all over the floor. I thoroughly rearranged the manila folders that I had put together the previous evening. Out of order pages, some even ripped. "You must be kidding me," I yelled. It was so loud that Connor left his room. He smirked as he glanced at the mess and then at me. "What? Have you been knocked down by a ghost?" I moved in closer. "Do you find this amusing? Have you returned to my room?" He laughed. "Dude, you need to relax. You're going crazy." "I mean it, Connor. Keep my belongings safe. Maybe lock your door next time." "Genius," he muttered as he simply rolled his eyes and left. The problem was that there were no locks on our bedroom doors. The restroom was the only one that did. I began taking precautions after that. I would keep my phone under the bed and conceal my work laptop and files beneath it, my pillow as I slept, and place a chair against my door's interior to create noise if someone attempted to open it. There was nothing for several nights. I began to unwind. Then, at around 2 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of the tiniest creak, which sounded like someone trying to move stealthily on the wooden floor close to my bed. I had a racing heart. I pretended to be asleep while keeping my eyes half open. I saw him at that point. A shadow crept up on them. Connor. In the dim light from the window, I could make out the silhouette of his hoodie. He was squatting close to my desk. I turned on my bedside lamp after waiting for a short while. "What on earth are you doing, Connor?" He froze and ran from the room. I sprung up and went after him, down the corridor. Before I reached his bedroom, he slammed the door. I pounded the door. "Man, open the fucking door. Why did you enter my room?" No response. "I saw you, Connor." At last he shouted. "You are completely insane. It's all in your head." My hands were shaking from adrenaline as I stood there panting heavily. That's when I realized I had to move out. However, the lease was joint, and management informed us up front that if either renter didn't agree to dissolve it, they would have to pay a hefty charge. The days that followed were tense. At work, Connor didn't even glance at me or speak to me. He began to eat lunch at a different table, but sometimes I felt like he was watching me. That silent, unsettling gaze that chilled you to the bone. Then one day he suddenly failed to show up for work. Word got out that he had been sacked by lunchtime. It seems that he was reported by one of our co-workers for sending her strange messages. HR referred to it as harassment. I had a great feeling of relief when I arrived home that evening. I might be able to breathe again now. However, that respite was short-lived. My heart fell when I opened the flat door. The location was demolished. The cushions were cut. The television screen broke. Lamps tipped over. My room appeared to have been struck by a tornado. The clothes were torn off the hangers. My bed turned around. Drawers spilled on the ground. I had lost my laptop. I made a police report right away and called the apartment manager. Given the extent of the damage and the fact that Connor's name was still on the lease, they declared they would take legal action. I shook as I sent them every picture I had taken. That night, I stayed at a co-worker's house. I was no longer able to remain there. I jumped every time I heard footsteps in my hallway or a door clicked down the hall. For weeks after that, Connor never returned to the premises, and the police never located my laptop. Later, I found out from a neighbor that the night before he was dismissed, he had been observed bringing trash bags outside. He had been observed bringing trash bags outside. The night I moved into my dorm at Northland University is still fresh in my memory. The time was mid-August. It was muggy and heavy, and there was a jittery exhilaration that only freshmen can relate to throughout the campus. I'd packed my folks' ancient Ford Escape to the brim and driven 6 hours from my hometown in Missouri. I convinced myself that my new dorm would seem like home with the help of boxes, suitcases, a little fridge, and a cheap Walmart lamp. Darren Cole was my roommate's name. We had been assigned at random by the housing office, and I knew nothing about him other than what was on a little card they handed me. Hometown in Iowa, Cedar Rapids. Mechanical engineering as a major. Darren was already in room 213B, sitting on his bed with headphones on, when I initially opened the door. Instead of looking up immediately, he nodded as if I had interrupted. "Hey, dude, my name is Jordan," I said, setting my duffel bag next to the bed. After a while, he took out one headphone and looked over. "Yeah, Darren." It was that. No grin, no greeting. He returned immediately to his laptop. I made an effort not to get upset. I assumed that everyone's approach to college is different. Some are overconfident, while others are anxious. Perhaps he was simply a quiet person. Throughout the initial days, we spake little. He seemed to be thinking about something else all the time, although he wasn't particularly impolite. He was quite quiet, and our room was always immaculate. Usually, he would leave early in the morning, return late, and spend hours staring at his computer screen while the curtains were drawn. I recall one evening phoning my mother. I mentioned, "Yeah, he's quiet," in an attempt to minimize how strange it seemed. She burst out laughing. "Isn't that preferable to being noisy? He's at least clean." "Yeah," I answered, trying to smile. Indeed, it is accurate. I was generally fine with the silence. By that time, I was beginning to settle in, and had boys from my English class, a girl named Lisa from the adjacent floor, and my own group of pals. I would spend time in the common area, play ping pong, discuss classes, and engage in pointless campus gossip. Usually, Darren was gone for the weekend by the time I returned. Before that one night in late October, everything was cozy. Friday had been a long day. I had spent the majority of the day at the library, and I had midterms coming up. Around 8 o'clock, I returned to the dorm, but Darren was gone. As usual, he had his laptop closed on his desk, and his bed made. Most likely returned home, I murmured to myself. I put my headphones on, dropped my backpack, and began playing games. It was silent. In fact, it's too quiet, and when the heat came on, I recalled the old radiator's soft ticking sound filling the room. At approximately 11 o'clock, I at last leaned back, stretched, and made the decision to put yourself to sleep. When I turned to face my bed, after taking off my headset, I noticed it. Motion. Just a slight movement toward the opposite side of the room was all that was visible. Staring at the shadowy area beneath Darren's bed, I froze. There were a few storage boxes and a refrigerator down there, but I thought something had moved. I leaned forward slightly and blinked. I saw it again after that. A human being. One hand. My heart jumped into my throat as I began to bounce backward. How in the hell? The voice of Darren then emerged from the darkness. I see you saw me. Slowly, he slid out, his face unreadable. He appeared to have been resting there 4 hours, with his hair flattened and his hoodie partly unzipped. Trying to laugh, I said, "Dude," but my voice broke. "What on earth are you doing underneath?" He smirked after a brief moment of embarrassment. "I'm just playing around, dude. I wanted to check in with you for 3 hours. Then he shrugged. I suppose I forgot the time. I just looked at him, hoping he would laugh or elaborate, but he didn't. He wiped a little of dust from his sweatshirt. He stated, "I'm going to brush my teeth," and left the room. Was the most normal thing in the world. For a long time afterward, I sat there, trying to understand what in the world that had been about. I feigned being on when he returned. My mobile device. After turning off his lamp and getting into bed, he was done. A few weeks later, things returned to normal. Darren didn't say much or make much noise, so I told myself it was just a strange joke. On one occasion, as we were walking to class, I informed Lisa about it. She laughed and replied, "He hid under your bed," but it was obvious that she was distressed. He said, "No, his bed. Well, beneath his bed." That's even weirder. That's not just strange, Jordan. That is really unsettling. I did not disagree. Then, a month or so later, things became worse. Wednesday night was the date, because I had stayed up later than normal typing a paper that was due that Friday. I can recall. Darren arrived at around 10 o'clock, left his stuff on the ground, and left without a word to use the restroom. He returned, but I was still at my desk. He merely sat there, staring, on his bed. He looked straight ahead, as if he were observing something I couldn't see, rather than at me. "You okay, dude?" At last, I inquired. He blinked and gave me the impression that he had just noticed me. "I'm simply exhausted." He shut off his lamp and positioned. By midnight, I was only half awake when I heard a sound, a slight metallic noise, akin to a tapping motion on the bed frame. When I opened my eyes, it was completely black in the room. When the sound stopped, I initially believed he could be mending something once more. After that, there was stillness. Once more, I began to float until I had the icy, clear sense that I was not alone. I almost stopped my heart when I turned my head. Standing next to my bed was Darren. His outline was just discernible through the breach in the door against the dim glow of the hallway light. He was staring at me with a blank expression, and the hammer, something dark and hefty, was in his hand. My linens tangled around my legs as I reflexively flinched backward. "What the hell, Darren?" He first remained motionless before lowering the hammer gradually. "Calm down," he murmured softly. "I just finished making my bed." An unsecured nail in the dark. I lost it. "You were standing over me, dude." He blinked as though he was perplexed by my anger. "You were walking about. I believe I roused you." I looked at him for a while. He spoke in a relaxed tone. "Too serene." I felt my heart pounding in my chest. When I eventually said, "Just go back to bed," he nodded and said, "Please," mumbled something like "sorry," and got back into bed. I didn't sleep again that night. My chest tightened at every little sound as I sat awake till the dawn rose. I went immediately to housing services and requested a room transfer the following morning. I told them that I was no longer comfortable, but I didn't go into detail. They estimated that processing could take a week or two. In order to stay with a buddy in a different building that evening, I locked myself in the room, telling Darren that I had a group project and would be gone for several evenings. All he did was nod. When I eventually received permission to relocate, I packed my belongings, waited until he had left for class, and departed without saying goodbye. I kept my new location a secret. I never ever again passed that hallway. I found out about Darren's suspension months later from someone on campus. An incident in the dorms, perhaps. I didn't inquire, and they refused to tell what had transpired. I still see that vision in my head, though, sometimes late at night, hammer in hand, him standing in the dark, looking down at me, as if he had already made up his mind. I also find myself wondering what may have happened if I hadn't woken up. Living in the dormitories was never really something I wanted to do. I recall my mother asking me whether I was certain I had brought my toothbrush. I stood in front of the 6-story red brick structure on the campus edge, suitcase in one hand. I pretended not to be anxious and simply nodded. It appeared older than I had anticipated. The fragrance hit me as soon as I went in, along with peeling paint and a flickering exit light over the glass doors. It was the combination of stale popcorn and cleaning spray that you only encounter in college residence halls. This incident occurred during my first year at Northlake University, a medium-sized institution in Indiana. My name is Aelana Brooks. Tessa was the unexpected roommate I was given. Never spoke to her or met her. The school simply provided her name and room number, beta 13. Half the room was occupied when I got there. A luggage stowed below a well-made bed on the left, along with a few ornaments, a candle she wasn't permitted to have, a picture of a lake taped to the wall, and a string of fairy lights. I recall thinking, great, she's one of those girls who's going to FaceTime her boyfriend all night. However, Tessa wasn't what I had anticipated when she eventually arrived. She had black circles under her eyes and was tall and skinny with blonde hair in an untidy knot. "Hey, you must be Aelana, right?" she remarked, hardly making eye contact as she entered. "Yeah," I replied with a clumsy smile. "Hey," she said as she threw her duffel bag onto the bed. "Cool. The left side will remain mine. Are you okay with that?" "Yes, that's all right." That was it. The first talk lasted that long. Nothing. No small conversation. No where you're from. She was scarce for the following few days. She would go before I woke up in the morning and return after midnight. On occasion, I would hear the door open softly, the sound of her footfall on the carpet, and then the creaking of the bed as she got into it. She didn't switch on the light. Nothing was ever said. I didn't care at first. I reasoned that perhaps she already had friends or was simply busy. That was the strange thing about college. Others just jumped right in. But when I realized I hadn't seen her in daylight for almost 2 weeks, it became even odd. Little things also existed. The scent, faint perfume every night. When she was away, her phone would buzz non-stop, and she would smell something sharp and flowery, like gardenia mixed with smoke. I kept seeing unknown caller after I saw it light up. I have a clear memory of one night. I was sitting at my desk, finishing an essay on a Thursday, while it was pouring outside. The door began to rattle as if someone was trying to open it softly at the stroke of midnight. Tessa slipped in, hoodie soaked, as soon as it opened. When she saw I was still awake, she appeared surprised. She said, "Oh, hey," as she stood still in the doorway. I said, "Hey," trying not to seem uncomfortable. "You all right?" "It's dripping out," she paused. "Yeah, just took a walk," she shrugged. "At midnight. I enjoy the rain." Then, fully clothed, wet clothes and all, she went to bed. She disappeared once more the following morning. Some of her belongings vanished a few days later. When I opened the door after class, her side of the room was deserted. Only the dent in the carpet where her bed frame had been, without any fairy lights, a picture, or a candle. "Hey, did you move out or something?" I texted her right away. No answer. I waited. 2 days were added to 1. 2 days became a week. Nothing. I initially believed that she might have moved rooms or dropped out. Although students occasionally take brief leaves of absence, the dorm management stated that her name was still associated with the room. I didn't pursue it even though it didn't make much sense. Not that I was whining either. Now I essentially only had one room. I moved things around, moved my bed to the middle, hung some posters and brought in a little bookshelf. Finally, it felt like my own space. It remained that way for months. It wasn't until April that I began to completely forget about her. On a Sunday evening, I had a midterm the next morning. I was so exhausted that I went to bed at 11:30. I woke up at around 2 in the morning when I heard keys jingling outside my door. Then the lock turned with a faint click. I went cold. My door was being unlocked by someone. The door creaked open slightly as the knob twisted. As the light from the hallway streamed in, I saw a slender woman in silhouette carrying things. With my heart racing, I sat up. "Who's there?" I muttered. I noticed her face as the door opened all the way. Tessa. Her eyes were sunken deeper, and she appeared exactly the same, except perhaps a shade paler. "What the hell did you do to the room?" she asked, dropping a duffel bag on the floor and assuming she owned the place. "What?" I sat up in utter bewilderment. "What happened to my stuff? Where's my bed?" "You left," I murmured, a little trembling in my voice. "You've been gone for 6 months." She simply gazed at me as if I was speaking a foreign language. "I was at the house of my boyfriend," she stated bluntly. "Okay, but you didn't tell me that," I answered, attempting to remain composed. "You never responded to my texts. I assumed you had moved out." She let out a sigh. "Your text did not reach me. My phone broke." Her damp jacket fell to the ground, and she was unloading her stuff there. There are books, clothes all over the place, and even a framed photo of her and a man grinning together in front of a lake. "You can't just show up this way, Tessa," I said. "It's the middle of the night." She looked at me icily. "Remember, it's my room too." I got chills just listening to her say it. I went immediately to housing services the following morning and requested a transfer. It may take several days, they said. I was forced to live with her once more for that week. Then things started to go wrong. She didn't get much sleep. Hours would pass while she sat silently on her bed, browsing through her phone. Occasionally, when I woke up, I noticed her simply gazing at the wall. She was saying something beneath her breath when I woke up one night. Before realizing there was no light and no phone in her hand, just her voice, I assumed she was on the phone. "Tessa," I said in a whisper. No answer. Now she continued to whisper more quickly. I managed to pieces. "He's still there." I caught a glimpse of him. He was in the window. I switched the lamp on. Her eyes were wide open. She sat with her legs crossed and her back to the wall. "Are you all right, Tessa?" She turned slowly in my direction, her face expressionless. "Even if you know someone isn't in the room, do you ever get the impression that they are?" I didn't respond. I simply got up, went downstairs to the lounge, and remained there till dawn. Her belongings were still there when she vanished a few days later. Her phone was still unlocked and resting on the desk. I glanced out of utter panic. A contact called E sent out dozens of texts. They didn't read the last few. "I can't be ignored any longer. You claim to have seen me in your dreams once more. Tessa, he's gone. Release him." The 2 days prior to her return, the final communication was sent. I heard something beneath her bed that night. A slight scratching noise. I went cold. The noise shifted, rhythmic and slow, akin to the dragging of linen. I made myself look. Her suitcase, a couple of boxes, and the subtle odor of something metallic and foul were all that was beneath it. I didn't give a damn where I landed up when housing finally transferred me to a different dorm. The resident advisor informed me 2 weeks later that Tessie's belongings were still in the room, undamaged, and had been discovered by campus police. She never returned to get them. Last semester, the week she vanished, her ex-boyfriend, the one in the picture, had perished in a vehicle accident. After she arrived at my door that evening, no one on campus saw her. I still get goosebumps sometimes when I remember that night, when she opened the door at 2 in the morning and whispered that unsettling inquiry. I can't help but think of the faint muddy footprints on the carpet that ran from the door to her bed, but none that led back out. I had no idea how drastically my life would alter after moving into that tiny apartment on the west side of town. I was desperate when I first signed the lease. After college, I had recently moved to Cincinnati and was working a menial job at a dental clinic that hardly paid my rent. Although wonderful, my last flat was pricey. I therefore seized the opportunity to purchase a 2-bedroom home for $900 when I saw the listing. It stated that the female roommate wanted a clean, laid-back, drama-free environment. I got to know Lena that way. In her mid-20s, she had tan complexion, bleach blonde hair with dark roots, a nose ring, and a half-lazy smile that gave the impression that she didn't take anything seriously. She was about my age. She informed me that she was employed at a Vine Street gas station. She appeared to be very typical polite, aloof, but not impolite. It wasn't much of an apartment. It smelled musty, thin walls, a flickering light in the kitchen that buzzed all the time, and a problem that no amount of fres could solve. It was something, though. The initial weeks were uneventful. Sometimes we struck up a conversation in the kitchen. I would tell her about my boss at the clinic, and she would tell me about obnoxious clients at work. We were just two people trying to make ends meet, but we were never truly friends. Then I struck it lucky. I received a promotion. Although there wasn't much money, it allowed me to at last consider buying a home of my own. At first, I kept it from Lena. She had been griping about her lack of money, her distaste for her work, and her plans to quit. I didn't want to come out as boastful. However, she stopped going to work a few weeks later. I didn't notice much at first. She was frequently looking through her phone or watching TV in the living room when I returned home from my day's absence. One evening, I said, "You off today?" She put her hoodie over her head and glanced up from the couch. "Yeah, got fired." "Oh, fuck, apologies. What took place?" She gave a shrug. "My boss is a jerk." I told her only that. I was hoping she would discover something quickly. After that, she remained silent. Things began to seem strange over the course of the following few weeks. She slept all day at home until noon, inviting late-night visitors. I had never seen these guys before. One of them had a tattoo on his neck that resembled a spider scuttling up his throat. I made an effort to avoid it. I wanted no difficulty. I simply counted the months till my lease expired and kept my door locked. Then everything changed one night. It was a Thursday. I can recall this because I got takeout on the way home from work after staying late. When I got in, Lena wasn't there. There was silence in the apartment. My phone buzzed while I was eating, taking a shower, and watching Netflix. Lena had sent the text. "Lena, hey, will you just come fetch me?" I scowled. "Me? What's happening? Where are you?" After a few seconds of silence, my phone began to ring. The answer was Lena, I said. She spoke haltingly. "Please come get me. I need you. I'm stuck." "You're where?" "I'm not sure," she stumbled. "In the vicinity of Mill Creek Park. I tried to walk after my car broke down, but I got lost." "Hold on. Mill Creek. It's around 10 minutes away. How did you get to that place?" "I was off to my new work," she said, spoken in between tiny tears. "Would you please come get me? I'm afraid." Her sobs sounded genuine, unfiltered, and frantic. "Okay," I replied. "Tell me where you are." She sent me a pin via SMS. I studied the map. She was in the middle of Mill Creek Park, close to the lake. At night, that park wasn't very pleasant. Other than the area around the parking lot, there were no lights. Additionally, the lake's surroundings were primarily wooded. Nevertheless, I picked up my keys and left. There was only one broken light flashing close to the edge of the parking lot when I pulled in. My stomach grew constricted. I gave her a call. "I'm here, all right. Exactly where are you?" I took a short stroll along the route. "There is a trail by the lake. Come down that way, please." "You entered the forest." "I didn't intend to. Just come, please. I'm icy." With a groan, I reached for my phone's flashlight. "All right, I'll be there. Please just keep chatting." I followed the dirt trail. The sound of gravel crunching beneath my shoes was excessively loud. With the help of my flashlight, I was able to see nothing but trees and an empty trail. "Lena," I exclaimed, "can you hear me?" No answer. I continued walking, while gazing at the tiny blue dot on my computer that indicated where she was. The distance ahead was only a few hundred feet. Then I heard the trees rustling. "Lena," nothing. Just another snapping sound, like a branch. My heart began to race. I made a leisurely circle while holding a flashlight that was trembling a little. I saw him at that point, about 30 feet distant. A man in a dark hoodie, with his hands in his pockets, emerges from behind a tree. I went cold. I said, hey, and attempting to come across as courageous. "You see a girl around here?" He simply began to approach me without responding. With a slight backward step, I said, "Hey man, I'm talking to you." Then, coming from the opposite direction, another man emerged from the path behind him. Then something clicked. This wasn't a coincidence, dude. I turned and ran, whispering. Behind me, I could hear footsteps thumping through the trees. They were shouting, and I heard one of them say, "Grab her." As I hurried down the trail, branches scraped my arms. My phone almost fell out of my grasp. I thought my chest may explode. Up ahead, I could see the lights of the parking lot. I was quite near. The back of my jacket was then grabbed by a hand. I twisted around and shouted, and we both fell hard. I scraped my knee as I hit the ground. I kicked up as hard as I could and caught the guy in the jaw when he tried to pin me. With a grunt, he collapsed sideways. The second one was still sprinting toward me up the trail. I clambered to my feet and took off running. Even though my leg was bleeding and my lungs were burning, all I had was adrenaline. Just as I arrived at the parking lot, I noticed headlights in the distance. There was an automobile approaching. I waved my arms and ran straight for it. "Please help." The two males stopped pursuing as the automobile slowed and honked. They were somewhat obscured by trees as they stood near the lot's edge. The window of the driver rolled down a bit. The woman appeared to be in her 40s. She yelled, "Are you okay?" "Call the cops," I shouted. "They're pursuing me." Her eyes were wild as she glanced behind me. Grabbing my phone, I called 911, shouting the information while continuing to look at the trees. I couldn't hear the woman whispering as she remained in her car. In the gloom, I saw movement once more, and then nothing. 10 minutes later, I nearly passed out in relief when I saw police lights flashing. About 20 minutes after the officers' search of the park, one of them returned and informed me that 3 individuals, 2 males and a woman, had been located. "Your roommate is saying she didn't know anything," he said. However, they discovered that she had planned the entire event with the boys, as evidenced by the narcotics in her suitcase and the text conversations on her phone, in order for them to rob me. She was meant to entice me there. That night, when they walked her past me in handcuffs, I sat in the rear of the patrol car and stared at her. She appeared unfrightened. She was icy and didn't even seem remorseful. With a hushed voice, she said, "It wasn't supposed to go like that. I'm still troubled by the line." The charges failed to adhere. She was placed on probation for drug possession, and the robbery charges were withdrawn. The following week, I moved out and changed my phone number. I occasionally still notice that flickering light in the corner of Mill Creek Park when I drive by it at night. And I know she's somewhere out there, so my heart begins to race once more. And she's still aware of my residence. It nearly didn't happen for me, which is why I can still clearly recall that semester. In my last year of medical school, I was worn out, broke, and barely surviving, but I was also determined to finish my internship. I was given the task of completing my hospital rotation at St. Coron General, a teaching hospital in a place I had never visited before. My name is Lena. While the majority of my students were fortunate enough to be assigned close to home, I was placed approximately 4 hours away. The hospital dorms were already packed, and I had no family there. I therefore started a frenetic hunt for an affordable and livable house to rent, just like other broke students do. My friend Riley, a fellow medical student in my class, texted me at that moment. "Hey Riley, where were you assigned?" I sent "It's kind of awful. Coron." "Riley, it's far. Hold on. Same. Are you looking for a nearby place to split rent?" I felt a sense of relief. Riley had been with me since my first year. We had previously pulled all-nighters together, and she was humorous and realistic. So, yes, I had faith in her. A Facebook had led us to a 2-person boarding room, Flynn Street, in a peaceful area only a bus stop from the hospital. Mrs. Porter, the landlady, was an elderly woman who appeared kind yet stern. She asked us to keep in mind that she didn't let guys stay overnight, put an end to the noise. Everything seemed okay when we initially moved in. It was a tiny, tidy room, wooden floors, white walls, and a bunk bed because it was more space efficient. I picked the top bunk, while Riley claimed the lower one. The first week passed without incident. We would awaken, collapse at night after our shifts, get up early, and stroll to the bus station together. We seldom spoke, save for sporadic late-night jokes about how medicine was slowly killing us because to our long hours and back-to-back patients. However, everything was altered by that one night, and that one week. I was quite exhausted on this Thursday evening. I hadn't eaten well, and the emergency room had been packed all day. Riley texted to let them know that one of the interns had called in, so she was covering an extra shift. Ill, I made the decision to eat at the nearest McDonald's. I recall the stroll, the humidity, the dim buzzing of the streetlights, and the subtle scent of coffee and antiseptic in my scrubs. Upon my return, it was around 10:30 p.m. The only sound coming from the boarding house was the faint brook hallway when I entered. After locking the door, I ascended the bunk and eventually lay down. My muscles were mushy. After a few minutes of half-conscious Facebook browsing, I messaged Riley, "Me, will you be home this evening?" Since I didn't immediately receive a response, I continued to browse through random films. I heard the door unlock for around 5 minutes. In the quiet, there was a piercing click. Riley had her own key, so I didn't hesitate even though I now knew I had locked it. I simply assumed she returned late. Silently, the door opened and closed. The faint rustle of a plastic bag, the sound of shoes being kicked off. The bunk underneath me shifted a little. I guess she got into bed. I avoided looking down. I was too worn out. "I'm finally finished." After a brief silence, she spoke gently from below. "Riley, yes, I got some breakfast supplies for tomorrow." With my eyes half closed, I gave a small smile. "Me, good. You are the greatest." For some minutes, we conversed. Just little, weird things. The new resident physician, who consistently made mistakes on the charts. Our coins continued getting eaten by the obnoxious vending machine. It was informal, every day. "Riley, could you please turn off the light?" Riley requested softly. The switch was around 5 meters from the door. I let out a groan. "You are closer to me, girl." "Riley, you succeed. I am unable to." My mind is racing. Her voice had become softer, almost strained. I pushed myself up and moaned in frustration. "Me, okay. I understand." I froze as I looked down to complain once more after sitting up. There was nobody in the bed underneath me. The blanket was folded just right. I had just been speaking to her, but her luggage was gone. My brain briefly refused to believe it. Leaning over, I looked down once more. Nothing. My gaze shifted to the bathroom door. Open. The lights are off. Me in silence. Riley. No response. My heart began to race. Every cleft of the ladder reverberated in the still room as I descended slowly. I looked behind the bathroom door, in the closet, and beneath the bed. Empty. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I nearly dropped it. Someone called. "Riley." I responded quickly. "Me, Riley. Where the devil are you?" Too much noise. Still at the medical facility. "I apologize for not seeing your message. Right now, I'm going to McDonald's. Do you have any desires?" There was a lot of background noise in her voice. Dishes clattering. People conversing. I felt sick to my stomach. I was whispering, "You are not at home, Riley." "No." "Why?" I didn't respond at all. I simply ran. Without even bothering to put on my shoes, I snatched up my phone and ran out the door. My feet slapped the chilly tile as I rushed down those tight stairs. As I went by, Mrs. Porter's door creaked open, but I continued on. People from the 24-hour laundromat across the street were staring at me as I gasped and hurried out into the street. At last, I noticed the shining McDonald's sign across the street, saw Riley carrying a paper bag inside while wearing scrubs. When she noticed me, she looked up and scowled. "Why are you, Riley and Lena? What took place?" I started bawling right then and there. I told her everything, including how I spoke to her, how I heard the door, and that there was something in her bed. She pondered before I showed her the call log. I might have imagined it. 2 minutes after that entity spoke to me, I spoke with her. We didn't return that evening. We shared a bed at a budget motel, but neither of us slept. We informed Mrs. Porter that we were leaving the following morning. She didn't even appear shocked. Before you girls arrived, that room was deserted for months, she murmured softly, pressing her lips together. The final person to remain there was also a nursing intern. The poor thing didn't wake up once. She said nothing else. That's how Riley and I packed our belongings. Day and, despite the higher price, located another location close to the hospital. Bunk beds were something I could never sleep in again. I constantly had the impression that someone was waiting below me. I swear I can still hear the creak of the bunk. That low, weak voice saying, "Turn off the lights." Occasionally, when I'm half asleep back home. I recall my initial move to the city. After graduating from college, I had just secured my first real job, an entry-level position with a downtown marketing agency. It all seemed so sudden, so loud, and so quick. Perhaps the loudest nighttime noise in Waverly, where I grew up, was a passing train or a cricket outside my window. Here, however, sirens could still be heard resonating through the streets at 2 in the morning. Hannah was the only person in the city that I knew. She was one of my co-workers. She was a kind, intelligent woman in her early 30s who had a soothing demeanor and an easy laugh. At work, she was adored by everyone. She was the kind that always remembered anniversaries, brought donuts on Fridays, and somehow managed to make even the most tense deadlines tolerable. I scowled at the outrageous costs as I browsed through apartment postings on my phone one afternoon after our shift. Hannah saw and inquired, "You're still looking for a place?" "Yes." I let out a sigh. "Everything appears dubious or is excessively costly." After a little pause, she spoke. "What do you know? In my apartment, I have an extra room. Although it is officially my roommate's room, he has been hinting that he may be moving out shortly. Until you locate a place of your own, how about spending a few days living in the living room? I don't mind at all. Everything." At first, I was hesitant. Hannah was so sincere and persistent that I eventually gave in. Even though I didn't want to bother her, I had no idea at the time that it would turn out to be one of the most disturbing decisions of my life. Hannah resided in a 2-story duplex in a peaceful East Side neighborhood. Everything we utilized was downstairs because the upstairs portion was being renovated. 2 bedrooms were present. Hannah's big, comfortable one, filled with plants and white curtains. Additionally, there was the smaller one that belonged to Caleb, her roommate. I put up my air mattress in the living room, which was large enough for me to sleep on the couch. It seemed safe enough, yet it felt fleeting. The night I moved in, I met Caleb around 8 p.m. While Hannah and I were making my bed, he silently arrived home. I looked around and paused for a moment. I didn't anticipate him. Tall and slender, Caleb's dirty blonde hair cascaded into his face. Despite the intense heat, he wore black jeans and a dark green hoodie. A huge scar that extended from his brow to his cheek was visible through his left eye. His face was expressionless, even icy. "Hey, Caleb," said Hannah with a smile. "This is Emily, a friend from work. Until she finds a place, she will remain for a few days." I caught a glimpse of Caleb's whitening eyes. At first, he remained silent. "Sure," he murmured, and proceeded directly to his room, clicking the door shut behind him. I turned to face Hannah. "Is he always like that?" She chuckled quietly. "No, he's just a little awkward and silent. I believe he's been through a lot, but he's not dangerous, not hurt." I would think about that word for months to come. It was all right at first. Like Hannah, I put in a lot of hours at work. As a result, we were too exhausted to converse much most evenings. Caleb spent most of his time in his room. Though he rarely spoke to any of us, I would occasionally hear his door open and close. About 4 days after I moved in, I noticed something strange for the first time. In order to use the restroom, I woke up in the middle of the night. With the exception of a dim yellow light coming from the kitchen, the flat was completely dark. Perhaps Hannah was up late working or munching, I reasoned. However, I noticed Caleb standing by the sink when I peered over the couch. He was not doing the dishes. He was cleaning a tiny object beneath the faucet, wrapping it in a cloth, and putting it in a plastic grocery bag. I went cold. He failed to notice me. When he was done, he secured the bag and turned to return to his room. As he moved, the floor creaked. I heard the lock click and his door close. I convinced myself that my reaction was exaggerated. Perhaps he was simply cleaning an odd object. Perhaps I had nothing to do with it. However, it occurred again the following evening. The air was filled with the same bleach odor. The sound of water running is the same, but he did notice me that time. What's keeping you up? He spoke in a low, flat voice that sounded unnatural. I pretended to have just woken up as I froze on the couch. I couldn't sleep, I guess. I suppose too much coffee. I made an effort to sound informal, but my heart was racing. Caleb studied me with a tilt of his head. The light from the kitchen glinted in his eyes. Try sleeping, he said in a whisper. At night, people perceive things that aren't actually there. He gave me a small smile, if you can call that a smile, and then leaned down enough that I could feel his breath. Emily, good night. I was shaking beneath the covers as he left. I told Hannah everything the following morning. I mean it, Hannah. Every night, he gets up to wash something in the sink. I could smell bleach, industrial bleach, and last night, he approached me. It wasn't typical. Hannah scowled. No, Caleb, no, he's strange. He's not dangerous, though. We've been friends for 2 years. He has never taken any action. However, you have no idea what he does at night. I demanded. You go to sleep. She rubbed her forehead and moaned. I understand you're worrying, Emily, but perhaps you're just nervous. Strange guy. New place. Big city. The worst is simple to imagine. Hannah, I'm not dreaming this. I lost my temper. I witnessed it. He's concealing something. We heard the front door open before she could answer. Caleb entered with a brown paper bag in his hand. He grinned too broadly. Good morning, ladies. Well, neither of us said anything. Hannah then made a light question in an attempt to defuse the situation. Caleb, hello. In any case, what do you do in the kitchen at night? Emily claimed to have been hearing things. He came to a halt. The grin disappeared. His expression stiffened. Why is your friend upset about that? Slowly, he said. No reason, answered Hannah hastily. We simply wanted to know. He whispered. I wash my clothes within the sink. Compared to the machine, it is quieter. You use the kitchen sink to wash your clothing. Before I could stop myself, I said. His eyes narrowed as his head jerked toward me. Yes, issue. I gave a head shake. I have a dry throat. All right, he murmured, dropping the bag on the counter. Then he slammed the door behind him and went out once again. I told Hannah that I wanted to check out his room after he left. Don't, Emily, firmly, she said. That is a privacy infringement. There is a problem with him. All I want to know is what before she had a chance to stop me. I rushed directly to Caleb's door after grabbing one of her bobby pins off her dresser. It was, of course, locked. Stop, Emily. Hannah took hold of my wrist. I gave her a desperate glance. You're not understanding. We may come to regret not checking sooner rather than later. She withdrew my hand. No, you're acting suspiciously. We squabbled loudly. That evening, I stormed out of the flat and crashed at a friend's house. I never returned. I was back in Waverley 6 months later when the police knocked on my parents' door and asked to see me. Detective Larson, a tall lady, asked me while displaying her badge. Last year, you lived with a woman named Hannah Ward. My stomach fell. Yes, but why? What took place? She's been reported missing. Larson said quietly. It's been more than 3 months since her family last heard from her. Her body was discovered beneath a bridge near Old Creek Road 2 days ago. My knees gave way. I was having trouble breathing. The body was claimed to be severely deteriorated, and identifying her took weeks. The name was then uttered. Caleb Reeves, her roommate, has been placed under arrest for secondary murder. My heart stopped beating. They informed me that Caleb was the one who had reported her missing to her parents. Pretending to care, he had even joined their hunt. However, The GPS information and receipts from his phone put him close to the bridge the night she vanished. Several bags of blood-stained cloths, sealed with bleach residue, were discovered by the police when they searched his room. Women's jewelry was also discovered, including Hannah's bracelet, which she wore to work every day. He stated during questioning that he discovered Hannah deceased following a dispute about rent. He claimed that in a panic, he disposed of her body to avoid taking the blame. He received a life sentence in prison. I can still see how he gazed at me from the kitchen that evening, the swirling sound of bleach in the sink, and I keep thinking if I should have stayed for one more week, would I have been the one sleeping on the couch for another night instead of Hannah? I had no idea how much living with someone else would affect my mental health. I was in a bit of a problem back in 2018, when I was a junior at Ridgeview State University in Oregon. For the next semester, I had nowhere to live. Months prior, the majority of my close pals had already signed leases, my girlfriend had moved out, and my old roommate had left. I couldn't decide whether to take a gap year or return to living in dorms. However, I happened to run with Liam Turner during finals week. In our sophomore year, we completed a class project together. It's just one of those split the work and never talk again situations. Nothing extraordinary. "Hey man, you got a place for next semester?" he inquired abruptly. "No," I told him. "I have a lease on this old two-bedroom place near campus," he added. "I need a roommate, but the rent is affordable. Are you in?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, of course," I replied. It seemed like a stroke of luck. It was a tiny dwelling, creaking flooring, aged white siding, and a porch that seemed ready to give way in a strong wind. It wasn't horrible, though. Any day, I'd prefer that to living in dorms. It had 2 bedrooms above, 1 bathroom upstairs, and another below by the kitchen. It was located on Holloway Street, a few blocks from the university. Liam assisted me in carrying some boxes inside when I initially moved home. He wasn't particularly chatty, but he also wasn't aloof. "The room on the left is yours," he said. "The person on the right receives icy as heck at night." That was it. Just business. No small conversation. No welcome drink. I assumed he was simply silent. It didn't disturb me because I'm a quiet person myself. For the first month after classes began, everything went smoothly. We spent little time together. Only courteous nods in the kitchen or brief exchanges such as "you got class today?" "Yes." 10 a.m. is not your off day. That was all. Then little things began to feel strange. The initial sound. It was around 2 a.m. in early October. When I woke up, I kept hearing this clicking sound that sounded like a door creaking open and then quickly closing again. The sound was too consistent, so I assumed it might be the wind. Click, creak, slam, creak, slam. I climbed out of bed, picked up my torch and phone, and made my way to the corridor. I was upstairs in my room. It was a sound from below. "Liam, you down there?" I yelled. No response. It was quiet when I reached the bottom of the steps. The kitchen is vacant. The living room is deserted. The front door was firmly closed. It frightened me. However, I reasoned that perhaps it was only the old wood expanding. After all, it was an old house. The following morning, I brought it up to Liam during breakfast. "Hey, what did you hear last night? Similar to the creaking of doors?" He gave a head shake. "No, dude. Slept soundly." I chuckled uncomfortably. "I suppose there are strange sounds coming from this house." "Yes," he responded with a slight smile. "That's what it does." He knocked at 3 o'clock and said it in a tone that remained with me, as if he knew something I didn't. I woke up to a knock on my bedroom door around a week later. Silence, followed by 3 slow knocks. I said groggy, "Liam." Nothing. After a minute of waiting, I stood up and opened the door. The corridor was deserted and dark. I even looked in his room. He had his door closed and his lights out. I simply went back to bed because I didn't want to wake him. 2 nights later, it occurred once more. Same knocks, same time. I made the decision to bring it up the following morning. "Did you come to my door last night, dude?" Rising from his porridge, he peered up. "No. Why would I?" I'm not sure. Perhaps you are in need of something. Are you dreaming, man? He grinned as he spoke. Are you certain that you are not sleepwalking? I was bothered by the way he said it. His eyes missed the sneer. I was studying late one November night for a midterm. It was approximately 1:30 a.m. downstairs, and I heard deliberate, steady footsteps. Crossing the living room, the creak stopped, then moved in the direction of the kitchen. I sent Liam a text. Hey, how are you? He immediately responded, yes. Are you downstairs? I felt sick to my stomach. No. Are you? No. I believed you to be. With our phones in our hands like weapons, we met halfway up the steps. We conducted a thorough search of the entire house. Every window closed, every door locked. Liam said nothing. Perhaps someone entered and then departed. How? I asked. No way. The rear doors were dead-bolted. Perhaps an animal. Perhaps a raccoon. Has a raccoon ever crossed hardwood floors? He chuckled. Well, just in case, you might want to sleep with a baseball bat. It was made worse somehow by the way he said it. Still partly laughing. The situation worsened a few weeks later. Around 2 a.m. one night, my door began pounding when I was sound asleep. Slamming, not knocking, as if someone had kicked it. It trembled on the hinges. I was immobile as I froze. After about 5 or 6 seconds, there was silence. I was hesitant to go to the door. Heart racing, I waited until I was certain it was over. It was completely dark in the hallway when I eventually opened it, as though someone had just been standing there. I could feel the chilly air hurrying past my legs. I asked Liam again that morning. I'm serious, man. Did you play tricks on me last night? He scowled. What are you discussing? My door was forcefully smashed by someone. He gave a shrug. Perhaps you had the dream again. I couldn't trust him, even if I wanted to. At night, I began to store a chair beneath my door or doorknob. 2 days later, a man called Riley Bowman sent me a Snapchat advertisement. He attended our school. Although I had occasionally seen him at events with Liam, we had never spoken. He messaged me right away after I added him again. Hey, you and Liam Turner share a home. Yes, why? We used to get together. Hear me out, dude. Has he been acting strangely around the house? I was surprised by that. What are you saying? Such as sounds, knocking on doors, etc. Yes, in fact. How did you find out? Dude thinks it's funny. He told me. 4 weeks. He has been treating you that way. My blood froze. Are you serious? Extremely serious. In his sophomore year, he did something to another man with whom he shared a room. It thrills him to frighten others. He even expressed his desire for you to leave so he could have the entire house to himself. I was at a loss for words. Riley emailed one more message. He used to ask me for assistance as well. We stopped being buddies after I came over one night, and we made noises in the kitchen as he texted the guy upstairs. Man, he's got problems. All I did was sit there and look at my phone. That implied that he was acting the entire time when Liam and I heard footsteps downstairs. I was ill. I waited till he came downstairs the following morning. He had a cup of coffee, his hair disheveled, and he appeared to be half sleeping. Then I said, we need to talk. For what reason did he gaze at me? Regarding all of the underscore you have been engaging in. What are you discussing? You understand exactly what I mean. The knocking, the sounds, everything. Dude, you're losing it. Riley informed me. You boasted about it, he said, regarding your attempt to frighten me. His face instantly became expressionless. Then he grinned. You believe what you hear. Man, you're implying that he is lying. He has a grudge against me. All he's attempting to do is agitate underscore. I gazed at him. You didn't do it. Then, he gave a shrug. I didn't realize you were that jumpy. But maybe once or twice as a joke. He genuinely laughed as he passed me and entered the kitchen. I recognized then that I could no longer live there. After that weighty feeling, the house felt different. It seemed like he was observing me at every creak, awaiting a response. Despite the fact that the lock hardly functioned, I began locking my door every night. I once heard faint murmurs coming from the hallway when I woke up at around 1 in the morning. The words were not readable. Then there was a faint tapping sound, like wood being drummed by fingers. Turning on my lamp, I sat up and yelled, "Liam, knock it off, quiet." Then I heard, in a faint voice, "You're no fun anymore." He owned it. Voice. For me. That was it. The following morning, I informed him that I was going and packed my belongings. "Guess you couldn't handle it." "Huh," he replied with a sly smile without arguing. For the remainder of the semester, I lived off campus with a friend. Liam also left a few weeks later. It was reported that he changed schools in the middle of the year. Riley later admitted to me that at his new apartment, he had treated another roommate the same way. When Liam began breaking into his room at night, while he was asleep, only that guy phoned the police. The thought of how long I lived in that house still gives me the chills. How he listened, watched, and played his little game every night. The worst part is that I swear I still hear it occasionally, while I'm attempting to go asleep in a different place. 3 slow knocks. While I'm attempting to go asleep in a different place. 3 slow knocks. I never imagined that my inability to sleep at night would be caused by the quiet job I got that fall. I was 27, broke, just divorced, and in dire need of a stable relationship at the time. I learned about this tiny private boarding home north of Eugene, Oregon, from my cousin. From the outside, the 2-story colonial-style house appeared innocent and charming. Willow Rest Home was its name. Room and meals included. The advertisement stated, "Looking for live-in assistants with light caregiving and cleaning. Must be trustworthy and kind." The phrase compassionate caught my attention. Taking care of elderly people didn't sound unpleasant, because I had experience cleaning errands and working in diners. It was quiet, at least. Edna and Marlene, 2 older women, were the owners. They claimed to have been friends for many years. Technically, Edna was the owner. Although the deed bore her name, Marlene was in charge of the most of the day-to-day tasks. Edna was a fragile, soft-spoken woman in her late 70s, with a white bun and unsteady hands. In contrast, Marlene, who was perhaps 65, was lively, sharp-eyed, and constantly discussing how to run the place effectively. 7 elderly or disabled persons lived at the boarding home, who were unable to live independently, except for the top level, where Edna and Marlene shared a room. Every room featured 2 beds. When there were 2 vacant bedrooms upstairs, I thought it was strange that they shared a room, but I didn't inquire. Marlene gave me a brief tour the day I started. "This is the kitchen. Label everything you make, please. The staff refrigerator is on the left. The appropriate one for locals. Honorable. Don't confuse that. Got it," I responded, attempting to keep up with her as she hurried along the short corridor. "You will vacuum on Wednesdays and Saturdays, mop every evening after dinner, and make sure that everyone has finished their laundry. If the old-timers' garments disappear, they may become irritable." When she stated it, she had a smile, but it wasn't a friendly one. It was formal and businesslike. As we passed the den, Edna stumbled out. She whispered, "Oh, is this our new helper?" When Marlene answered, "Yes, this is Leia. She's going to keep the place tidy." Edna gave a nice grin. "Greetings, my love. Having another amiable face here is pleasant." Her eyes had a melancholy expression, as if she wanted to say more, but was unable to. I had an uneventful first week. The house was old yet comfortable, with fading flowery draperies and creaking floors. Most of the residents were silent. Mr. Harrison was one of those people who loved to tell war stories yet needed a walker. Every morning, Anita, a kind woman, spoke to her late husband. Additionally, a younger man in his 40s named Dale has modest baseball card collectors with developmental impairments. Marlene managed the establishment like a captain of a ship. At 5 in the morning, she was shouting for everyone to come to breakfast and then yelling at me to clean the tables more quickly. Leia, efficiency. She would snap her fingers and remark, "Efficiency." Edna, on the other hand, tended to remain upstairs. On certain days, I would see her come down for lunch, trembling as she grabbed the banister, pallid and sweating. She would eat very little before hurrying back up. "You're all right, Miss Edna?" One afternoon, I inquired. She gave a feeble smile. "Oh, I just occasionally get these spells. Marlene looks after me well. She makes sure I get enough sleep and administers my vaccinations. When she said, shots for my allergies, her eyes flitted away when she said it. But it was nothing serious. I was sweeping the hallway one wet evening when I heard coughing coming from the stairs. Edna was sitting halfway down, clutching her chest. When I looked up, "Are you okay, Miss Edna?" She appeared light-headed as she attempted to wave me away. "All I need is my shot." Marlene has gone shopping for groceries. That's too long for me to wait. I paused. "Ma'am, I'm not a nurse." "It's simple," she muttered. "The top drawer contains it. Please just give it a slap on the arm." I escorted her upstairs to the room. There was only one lamp and faded wallpaper. There were two twin beds next to each other. Edna's was the one at the window. There was a pile of documents, medication bottles, and what appeared to be checkbooks in the one nearer the door. The syringe was in a tiny medical pouch with the label prednisol steroid injection. I assumed it was okay because the vial had her name. I took my time, as I had observed nurses doing when my father was ill years before. Her respiration calmed down after a few minutes. She gave a small smile. "You're an angel." "Thank you." "No problem," I replied. "However, you should definitely get checked out by a doctor. Marlene takes care of that. You know, she was a nurse's assistant once." I nodded, but I couldn't help but notice the metallic and antiseptic odor in the air. "Why do you both share this room?" I asked softly as I was adjusting the covers. "I take it there are two more up here." She hesitated. "I would rather not be by myself. Sometimes I have night terrors." The front door slammed downstairs before I could ask any more questions. "Edna," the voice of Marlene thundered. "You're where?" She showed up a few seconds later, staring at me as if I had broken in. "Why on earth are you up here? I told you there would be no staff upstairs since Edna wasn't feeling well." I said, "Calm down." She requested assistance. I simply gave her a chance. For a brief moment, Marlene's eyes widened before she collected herself. "What are you?" "In the drawer." I administered the injection to her. She lowered her voice. "Yes, exactly. I'm grateful for that." Her shoulders, however, were tense. She turned to face me after assisting Edna in lying down, saying sweetly, "Please come get me the next time." Some of those medications are not what they appear to be. I got a chill from the way she stated it. As the days passed, I began to notice strange occurrences. The mail was always handled by Marlene. Her response to residents' inquiries about their social security checks was, "Don't worry, I deposit them for you," before leaving. I once saw her cramming a couple of envelopes into her purse. The money came next. One night, I saw her creeping into the kitchen with a flashlight while barefoot, pulling out a plastic grocery bag from beneath the sink cabinet. She carefully unwrapped it. Bundles of newspapers from it. Green money flashed before my eyes. The sound of a brook made her freeze. I was directly in the path of her flashlight beam. It swept across the kitchen. "Hersing, Jesus, Leia," she said. "You trying to give me a heart attack?" I whispered, "I just came for water. After that, get some water and head to bed." After a long moment of staring at me, she pushed the bag back under the cabinet. I waited for a minute after she departed, then knelt down to be sure. The sack was quickly filled with thousands of dollars in cash. The pit in my gut changed to dread at that point. After a few weeks, Edna's health deteriorated. She had a hard time getting out of bed. I never saw a doctor arrive, even though Marlene claimed to have phoned one. Then one morning, Marlene stated plainly, her eyes ringed with red, "Edna died while she was asleep." The silence in the house fell. A few locals wept quietly. Others only gazed as I inquired about their platters. "Did you call the coroner?" She stated, "It's taken care of. She was under AD&R, natural reasons. She will be picked up tonight by the funeral home." However, I didn't like something about the tone she used. I watched from the porch in the storm that night as the hearse drew away. Behind me, Marlene emerged, puffing on a cigarette. "Sad, huh?" she requested. "We spent 30 years as friends. I suppose I'm alone now." She gave a slight smile, but it was not reflected in her eyes. Marlene changed the moment Edna passed away. She began renting out the spare rooms, redoing the upstairs, and continuously yelling at everyone. Avoid wasting food. Money is involved in everything. By 10 o'clock, the lights are out. Never ask me about the mail. Then the abductions began. Dale, the man holding the baseball cards, was the first. One afternoon, he informed me that his sister had sent him a $300 check. He asked Marlene if it had arrived 2 days later. No check this month, she remarked. However, I had already seen her with his mail, putting something in the pocket of her cardigan. I heard digging noises in the backyard that evening. Scrape, pause, and then scrape. I took a look out my window. Marlene was squatting by the distant fence, digging dirt, while holding a flashlight in her teeth. The beam struck her face as she twisted her head, and our eyes locked for a moment. A terrible smile crept over her lips. Wild eyes, yellow teeth, and thin lips. With a pounding heart, I immediately ducked. Until daylight, I remained huddled behind the wall. Dale was gone the following morning. Where's Dale? I inquired casually during breakfast. With a shrug, Marlene stated he was going to live with his sister, packed his belongings, and walked away. I turned to look at his room. The bedding had a slight bleach odor, and the bed was naked. I began discreetly recording things, taking brief pictures when she wasn't looking, and writing notes on my phone. I was aware that wickedness was taking place. Then she lost it one night. It was almost midnight. She came at the end of the corridor and blocked my path as I was making my way to my room. Have you been observing me? She asked quietly. What? Don't act foolish, my love. You snoop all the time. You believe that when someone touches my belongings, I'm unaware of it. I'm afraid of you, Marlene. Excellent. Perhaps you ought to be afraid. She pounced and bit my cheek so forcefully that I yelled as I turned to go. My skin tore. Gush. That I yelled as I turned to go. My skin tore. Gush. I never imagined that I would still get shivers when I think back on that year. It began the summer I relocated to Oregon for college. The same summer I turned 22. I was eager to leave my homeland of Arizona, being accepted into Willamette Valley University's transfer program. I wanted to make a fresh start, make new friends, and feel like I had a life of my own. However, it is not inexpensive to move out of state. My mom's assistance and the meager savings I had from working a part-time job at a gas station were helping me get by. I therefore jumped on a Craigslist ad for a room in a 2-bedroom apartment that was only 15 minutes from university and reasonably priced. $550 divided by month, the advertisement stated. Included are utilities, preferably a female roommate. Clean, silent, and dramatic. For pictures, use text. I immediately texted. I received an answer a few minutes later. She, hi, my name is Callie. The room is still open. If you'd like, you can come see it today. Me, excellent, regards. What time suits you best? Her at any point after 4 o'clock. She even included a small smiley face, which strangely gave her a typical, amiable appearance. This could be my lucky break, I thought. It was about 4:30 when I arrived. The apartment was in a 3-story, beige structure hidden behind a strip mall with a small pizza business, a 7-Eleven, and a laundromat, not ostentatious, but not shady either. Typical college town fare. Before I could even knock, Callie answered the door. She had jet black hair that reached her shoulders and was taller than me, perhaps 5'9". She seemed like she had just stepped out of an old photo thanks to her pale powdered appearance and heavy eyeliner that accentuated her grey-blue eyes. You must be Laurel, she said with a broad smile. Yes, I appreciate you allowing me to visit. She stepped aside and responded. No problem at all. Enter. Ignore the boxes from my last roommate that I'm still cleaning. In fact, the apartment was adorable. The living area was modest, with a coffee table that had seen better days and a used couch. The kitchen had peeling white and was small. Cabinetry and a subtle perfume of candles with a vanilla scent. I enjoyed it. It had a lived-in feel. She showed me the simple yet well-lit room. There was a window facing a maple tree, a carpeted floor, and a respectable closet. She stated, "It's 600 including everything, but I'll reduce it to 550 if you pay on time." It was unbelievable to me. Really? Yes. Having someone I can trust is preferable to chasing others for money. That was it. The following week, I relocated. Callie was quirky, but innocuous at first. She was generally quiet, a little awkward, but pleasant enough. She recommended that we go to the small restaurant downstairs for pizza the first evening, I moved there. I reasoned that having friendly roommates was a good idea. We sat at a booth by the window and ordered a medium pepperoni. She took a sip of her cola and said, "So, what are you studying?" "Psychology, according to me." I finished my studies. I work from home as a freelance graphic designer." "That's awesome, I see." She leaned forward a little and grinned. "You remind me of someone you know." "Oh," she studied my face, squinting. "Yes, you do resemble Brad Pitt when he was younger." I chuckled. "Oh, I wish." "Really?" she answered gravely. "It's eerie. The nose, the jawline, and even the hair. In Legends of the Fall, you can be his double." She wasn't kidding, but I simply laughed and shifted the conversation. She brought it up again and again. She brought it up 5 or 6 times throughout supper. "No, seriously, it's freaking me out," she would reply, laughing with a high-pitched, almost childlike laugh whenever I made an awful joke. Perhaps she was just one of those folks who says strange things when they're anxious, I reasoned. However, it remained in my mind. She offered to show me the rest of the apartment, her artwork, and some of her projects a few nights later. "Sure," I replied, wondering. Her most of the time, the bedroom door was closed. She opened it, and I was immediately assaulted by a pleasant, artificial scent that smelled like vanilla and cheap roses. When I saw it, I froze. Brad Pitt pictures, posters, magazine cutouts, and even printed screenshots from his films were plastered over her walls. Above her bed was a large framed picture of him from Fight Club, shirtless, and in the middle of a punch. Whoa, what a surprise. I tried to sound informal as I spoke. "I take it you're a huge fan." She looked at the picture and grinned. "Since I was around 12 years old, I have been watching his film. He is flawless." I felt my stomach turn a little at her tone. There was only dedication, no humor or irony. Abruptly, she turned around to face me. "Now you see what I mean." "What?" "You resemble him exactly." I chuckled uneasily. "Indeed, perhaps if you squint." She grinned broadly. "No, Laurel, I mean it." Her voice had a dismal quality to it. "I mean it." I excused myself to get some water and pretended not to notice. I had trouble sleeping that night. In the hallway, I could still smell the perfume. Things became increasingly strange over the next weeks. Callie no longer spoke to me very often. I would hear her chuckle the same high-pitched giggle, muffled through the wall, as she slipped into her bed after returning from somewhere. She would occasionally whisper to herself. That's how it sounded. At least a murmur followed by another burst of laughter. I once turned to get my drink while working on my homework, while seated on the couch. She was simply standing in the corridor. I leapt. "You scared me, Callie, Jesus." She merely smiled slightly without saying anything at first. "Your hair down is what I enjoy. When you wear it that way, you really do look like him," she finally said. "Ah, thanks." With a small chuckle, she entered her room and gently closed the door. My heart continued to race while I sat there for a while. Things worsened around 3 weeks later, on the night of 2 a.m. around 2 in the morning. I heard a metallic clinking sound that startled me up. I initially assumed it was coming from outside, possibly from the vending machine close to the building entrance. However, I later discovered that it was emanating from within our flat, the deadbolt spinning sound. I silently unlocked my bedroom door after grabbing my phone. Even though the hallway was completely dark, I could still see Callie's shadow next to the front door. She was pressing her face against it and turning the lock back and forth, while mumbling something. "Callie," I whispered. No answer. I moved in closer. "Are you all right?" She became motionless and stopped twisting the lock. Then she carefully turned her head in my direction without moving her body. Her eyes were big and glassy and unblinking in the dim light of the street outside. "What on earth are you doing, Callie?" She gave one blink. I wanted to make sure he didn't go. "Who?" Once more, her lips quirked into that giggle. "Brad." I went cold. "What? He's present," she muttered. "He occasionally pays a visit, but he always tries to get away." Unsure of what to say, I simply stood there. At last, she refocused on the door and started humming quietly to herself. That night, I didn't sleep at all and closed my door. I texted my pal Megan the following morning. My roommate seems to be going crazy. I must leave." "What happened, Megan?" "A long tale. Could I stay with you for a few of days?" "Yes," she said. I made the decision to pack and depart over the weekend. That day, Callie seldom left her room. Her muttering and pacing were audible to me. She entered the kitchen abruptly that night while I was preparing toast. "Are you going somewhere?" she inquired. I felt sick to my stomach. "It's my friend's birthday." "Huh, maybe I'll stay over." She gave a small smile. "You ought to remain at home. He dislikes it when people go." "Who doesn't?" She simply returned to her room after giggling. That was it. I texted first thing in the morning. "Megan will come collect me." Around 9 a.m. the following day, someone knocked on the door. When I opened it, I saw 2 officers in uniform, but I believed it was Megan. One of them said, "Morning, ma'am. Does a Collie Monroe live here?" "Yes," I replied, astonished. "Why? What's happening? Do you mind if we enter?" I moved aside and nodded. One of them glanced back at me after scanning the apartment. "We have an arrest warrant for her. We think she might be related to a murder that happened a year ago. Are you aware of her current location?" Stunned, I shook my head. "I believe she's in her room." At that moment, there was a loud crash, like glass breaking. After drawing their rifles, the officers sprinted to her door. "Open the door, Callie," someone yelled. No answer. The door finally broke open after they kicked it several times. My instinct was to follow them, but what I saw made me gag. The drapes were fluttering madly in the open window. A terrible stench hit me, like a brick wall in her closet, after she left. I watched the door slowly open by one of the officers, an outstretched human hand behind a blanket. The officer screamed, rotted, discolored. "Forensics and backup are now necessary." I was having trouble breathing. I staggered back, trembling. Beneath that blanket was the decomposing body of a man wearing a paper mask with Brad Pitt's image printed on it. Later, the coroner verified that he was her former roommate, Ben Carter. The unit was blocked off as a crime scene. Hours were spent questioning me. I stayed at a motel across town that night. I contacted my mother and told her everything while my hands continued to shake. She sobbed, and so did I. Her pallid face turned toward me in the darkness every time I closed my eyes. 4 days after that, 3 days later, I was attempting to gather myself while I waited for the bus close to.